Well, to a large extent, Beverly, we still simply don't know. And that's because the text of this defense pact hasn't yet been made public. Now, we will get to see it, at least within the next few months, because both the US and the PNG governments have said that they do intend to release it at some point in the near future, once it's gone through various parliamentary processes. So this will be a public document that experts, civil society groups, the opposition in both countries will be able to go through with a fine-tooth comb to get a sense of what it is. But in the absence of that final text, all we can really go on are the assurances that both Antony Blinken and James Marape have said. Now, what are those assurances? Well, the James Marape, the Prime Minister of PNG, has said repeatedly that this text won't breach the constitution of Papua New Guinea. He's also said that there will be no immunity for US personnel who commit crimes in Papua New Guinea. Now, he said that because a leaked draft of the text seemed to point towards some haggling between the US and PNG officials about a level of immunity for US personnel. And he's also said that PNG will have to green light any move by the United States to actually establish more of a military presence in PNG through PNG military facilities. Now, again, this is in response to that leaked draft text, which hasn't been verified yet, which seemed to point to the fact that the US was looking for pretty wide-ranging access to a number of facilities in PNG. So at this point, I think a couple of things are clear. One, there are going to be some brackets put around the US military presence in PNG, some checks and balances which are going to be in the agreement. But two, and undeniably, this will potentially open the door to more American military personnel within the country. As several people inside PNG have said, the US wouldn't be doing this if it didn't have a determination to try and actually embed itself more firmly within Papua New Guinea. But as for the details, what is or isn't permitted, we'll simply have to wait and see until we actually get the final text, hopefully in coming weeks.
And, there's also some business opportunities, US business investment that has been held out. Do you think this is going to stall in the Papua New Guinea Parliament? Could there be objection to this pact?
It's a good question, Beverly. At this stage, we don't know. The opposition has made it clear it has concerns about this agreement. It's said that it believes that it could compromise PNG's independence and sovereignty, that it amounts to picking a side in the great geopolitical contest that we're seeing at the moment in the Pacific between China on one side and Western nations, particularly the US and Australia, on the other. We've also seen quite a number of protests in Papua New Guinea, in particular at university campuses, where a number of students have also said that they believe that this agreement might be fatal for Papua New Guinea's independence. Whether this gets a head of steam or whether it dissipates in the coming days and weeks, we simply don't know. There does seem to be a level of political opposition in the country, but how serious and sustained that opposition will be, we just don't know at this point. And James Marape and his government seem determined to push this through. James Marape insists that this won't in any way compromise PNG's sovereignty, that Port Moresby will still have the ability to strike agreements, including military and economic agreements with other countries, including China, and that nothing will be done without the specific and explicit green light of PNG's government. So he seems to be arguing that this is basically a great shortcut for the Papua New Guinea Army and Defence Forces more broadly to gain extra training opportunities, for more money to flow from the US to actually upgrade PNG defence facilities. There's a separate shipwriters agreement that will see US Coast Guard personnel and potentially vessels come into PNG waters to try and guard against illegal fishing and potentially drug smuggling as well. So James Marape sees huge benefits here for the PNG without any loss of independence and sovereignty, and he seems intent on pushing this through.
Narendra Modi, India's Prime Minister, is also there for the meetings ahead of his visit to Australia. What role does India want to play in this region?
Yeah, it's difficult to say at this stage. I think we are definitely seeing some very clear signalling here from New Delhi. The fact that we've now had the third meeting between India and Pacific Island nations is a pretty clear indication that India is intent on trying to entrench its strategic, its development, and its economic links, as well as its cultural links, which are quite strong with the Pacific. Now, it is early days. I don't think we should overstate it compared to the other players in the Pacific and the traditional powers, including, Australia, New Zealand, the US, increasingly China, of course. India is still a relatively small player. Its aid outreach, for example, or its aid spending is dwarfed by those of the traditional donors, let alone the multilateral institutions in the Pacific. And in some senses, it's starting from a much lower base than those nations that have had many decades of experience working with and investing in the Pacific. But I do think that there is a bit of intent being shown here by India. It does seem to be signaling that it wants to be a bigger and more influential player in the Pacific. And the response from James Marape, in particular, Prime Minister of PNG, today to Narendra Modi's arrival in PNG in this meeting was really striking. Mr. Marape said that he wanted India to emerge as a third voice or a third big voice on the global stage. Presumably that's the third after the US and China. And that India was a natural ally and champion for the Pacific Island region and its interests, whether that's on development finance or on climate change or just about giving the so-called global south a more prominent role and decision-making capability at the high table of international diplomacy. So I think that language, whatever it amounts to in the end, I don't think we know, but it was still striking to see Mr. Marape embrace Mr. Modi and India with such fervour. And it might signal that there is some work there that India can do to really entrench its position in the South Pacific.
Good to talk, Stephen. It's been quite a busy day for Pacific nations. Nice to have you on. Thanks so much.
No problem, Beverly. Thanks for having me.